The following is a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.
Welcome back, everybody. It's Kiefer and Curry for another week of broadcast excellence. We're going to steal that from Rush Limbaugh. I don't think he'll mind. Kip and Tony come to you every week with a variety of topics, and a lot of times we focus on one of our great passions, and that's the wide world of sports. Tony, I know you've got a lot of programming on your network with the UAB guys, Mark Ingram, the athletic director, Andy Kennedy, Trent Dilfer. You had to be thrilled. I said to you last week on the set of our TV show before we sat down and put together another award-winning episode, I said, gosh, I think UAB's got a really good team, but unless they can win the AAC tournament, I guess they're not going to get in. And we just kind of shrugged and said, yeah, that's too bad. Well, guess what? They won the AAC tournament. How phenomenal is that?
How fantastic was that? And obviously they had to get past that semifinal game, and then they took on a Temple team that obviously came out of nowhere.
And a losing record and got all the way to the finals.
Yeah, and it's hard to believe because they set a record for winning 4 AAC games in 4 days. They would have had to win 5 games in 5 days. They're the only team in AAC history to win 4 games in 4 days. And what do you get for it? You're stuck on the couch at home watching. I mean, that sucks. When you win 4 games in 4 days and you still have nothing to show for it, I don't even think they got an NIT out of it. So that really sucks for them. And you're talking about a basketball team that had a 10-game losing streak. That would have been just incredible for Temple to pull that out. But that's why March Madness is so much fun. I'm certainly going to go that route this morning and this afternoon when we talk about our show here and some of the wonderful things about the postseason play. But yeah, for the UAB Blizzards to go into the AAC in their first year, I know Mark and those guys, that was the only way they're going to get in. Another 20-win season. It's amazing to me, and Andy Kennedy's done a wonderful job. In the last 4 years, I want you to think about this because we're going to go by the Gene Bartow years. We're going to go back to the UCLA years. UAB Blazer basketball, they've won more basketball games in the last 4 years than any other 4-year stretch in the history of that program. And listen, you can say whatever you want about UAB, and I realize they're a group of 5 school. They're a smaller school. They normally won't get an at-large bid. They may out of the AAC. They certainly were going to get into the Conference USA. But to sit there and say they won more basketball games in the last 4 years under Andy Kennedy than any other time, even under Gene, is pretty amazing.
That's it really astounding.
Yeah,
really.
The baton has been handed, as far as I'm concerned, firmly. Gene will always be known as the man of UAB basketball. He certainly put it on the map. But Andy's taking it to another level. So congratulations to UAB Blazers, and can't wait for March Madness. And yeah, we got Samford in, which is super fun. We got UAB in. We got Auburn in. We got Alabama in. If my Xavier Musketeers are dumbasses, if the Xavier Musketeers would have had a decent year this year, I would have had all my favorite teams in, but we came close.
Yeah, and they're a mainstay in the tournament. It's really always surprising if the Musketeers are participating. Yep. Maybe they just played with 3 guys. Were they the 3 Musketeers this year?
They played like they were the 3 Musketeers because most of the time it was like there's only 3 guys on the court for sure. But that's okay. They're perennial, like you said. They get in most of the time. But now all you got to do is win 1 game. And it takes it to an all new level, man. When you're one of the final 32 teams and you get to play on that second day, it's like winning the second championship. To win 1 championship's amazing. If you can win 2, it puts you in rarefied air. To make it to that field of 32 would be huge for either one of the schools. And a lot of people are loving both UAB and Samford.
I know. They're calling for both of them having an upset chance.
Yeah, I mean, you got that 12-5 seed thing. People love that. And obviously, Samford plays a style of basketball. And I saw Bucky on ESPN. Yeah, the pregame show. He's a rare bird, man. He's a
classic. I'm telling you. I found out last night, Tony. I had no idea that Bucky, because a high school coach doesn't exactly make Brinks truck money. I found out last night from a gentleman who I had a business dinner with last night, told me that Bucky McMillan, at one time when he was the head coach at Mountain Brook High School, was one of the most accomplished Texas Hold'em players in the entire country.
Really?
He was winning big $25,000 and $30,000 card tournaments while he's to supplement his income as coach. Supposedly he's not playing very much now because he's got more things to do at Samford. But what a fascinating personality.
That is, boy, and to have that gambling angle at a university University like Sanford, look out now.
Isn't that interesting?
That is really interesting. Next thing,
that just tells you what a great coach he is, because there are times when the administration might have said, I don't know, he's got kind of a questionable background because he plays in poker tournaments, but it's become that used to be an elephant in the room, but it's not anymore.
Look
because
they may start allowing dancing at Sanford before you know it. Look out. Look out.
If they win a game in the tournament, they'll be dancing in the streets right now.
Yes, they will be.
Homewood.
Yeah, you're right. One of the first things I ever did, I got hired to do to play music. I used to have a couple of SP3 PVs and some Technique 1200 turntables. And when I first got in town in 1989, Sanford called me up and asked me if I'd come down and spin records at their Spring Fling. They had this thing called a Spring Fling. And I got down there, and of course, I had no idea what kind of college Sanford was. I just knew it was a college campus. And so I got down and I'm playing music.
A beautiful college campus.
It really is. And I'm sitting there playing music, and no one's dancing. And of course, the way I look with whether I'm successful or not is if people aren't dancing, I'm not playing good music. And so I was doing everything I possibly could to get people to dance. And long story short, the president of the university came up to me about an hour into it and said, what do we owe you? And I said, X amount of dollars. He goes, I'm just going to go ahead and pay you. And you just go on. You could just take off. And I was like, what? He goes, we really don't like that type of movement on our. And I was
what did they expect you to play, Bing Crosby?
I don't know. And I was like, well, I wish I had known that before, because heck, I said, this is the easiest gig I've ever had to play. I don't have to worry about anyone.
Oh, man.
So, and I think I made a big kibitz about it on my radio show on Classic Rock 99.5. So awesome. It's congratulations to them, and that's really one of the reasons we are going through. Let's get into it. I want you to start because this was your idea. I kind of want to know where you're going to go first, but just we're talking about postseasons. We're talking about sports in their postseason,
and every sport has a postseason, a championship, and I just am amazed every year at how huge March Madness, the entire NCAA men's tournament has become, and now even the women's tournament. It's amazing what a phenomenon it is. And I think for some of the reasons we just kind of touched on, because you do have that David versus Goliath thing, and everybody is so compelled, and it's later this week on Thursday and Friday. You get those matchups of schools that never get an opportunity to face the Herculean teams in the sport, and it's amazing how often in those opening round games that some of these teams that you just think have no chance to lose, that are 15 and 20 point favorites, crumble and go down. And also just so many famous results in the actual main parts of the tournament. Maybe one of the greatest upsets, other than the USA beating Russia in the Miracle on Ice back in 1980. But think back, Tony, to a couple of classic final games where a way overmanned Villanova, not a Villanova team, but they I guess it was Villanova. They beat Georgetown in the finals of the NCAA tournament with a team that had Patrick Ewing and others who would go on to huge NBA careers. And Pinckney, the Villanova guy, had like a perfect game. He didn't miss a shot. He had 18 rebounds and all that. But you have those kind of monumental upsets, and probably the greatest one of all time, Jim Valvano and North Carolina State knocking out the Houston Cougars, who had only lost one game all year. They had Akeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler, Michael Young, maybe one of the best college basketball teams ever assembled. Vegas also, the Running Rebels lost to Mike Krzyzewski and Duke, where they had won 64 of their last 65. So you have these monumental David and Goliath upsets. And it kind of separates the March Madness tournament from some of the others, because you don't see a team in the NFL playoffs that first of all, you don't have the really teams that aren't accomplished in that tournament. So you don't have the monumental upsets, but the World Series, the Super Bowl, the NBA Finals, and you and I have talked about soccer before, but the World Cup is just a massive event. The Stanley Cup Finals. There's so many great events and so many great finals, but I kind of wanted to compare some of your memories of those to this, what we're going to witness these next couple of weeks in the NCAA tournament. And for Americans, I don't think any of them, including the Super Bowl, which is the most viewed show of the year on television, but I don't think it captures the drama that you get in this upcoming March Madness tournament.
What I love about March Madness the most, I mean, I love college football, and I'll always love college football, but college basketball, it's just, I mean, I absolutely think it's one of the best. Well, it is the best postseason period. And the reason being is you have two shots to make a national championship out of yourself. There's no other sport where you actually play a conference championship. So you have a chance to win a championship there. And if you win your conference championship, you get an automatic bid. So you could be 0-23 and win your conference championship. Now, there are a couple of conferences, I believe. I think the Big East for a while there did it where you actually, based on your win percentage, you maybe didn't even make the postseason into your conference. But I think that's gone now. So no matter how lousy you play the entire season, like Temple lost 10 games in a row, you got a chance to still make the big dance. And they came really, really close to making that happen and losing 10 games in a row, which I love. And then, of course, obviously, if you make it in, then you're in this other conference or conference championship, if you will, being the NCAA tournament. In the history of the tournament, since we went 64, 65 teams, since I think it was 85, there have only been 4 teams to get into March Madness with perfect records. And I go back and think about those Indiana teams and some of the unbelievable basketball teams back from the 80s and the early 90s. There have been 19 teams, Kip, that have gotten into March Madness with a 500 record or worse. Including 3 teams in 95, Florida International, in 96, UCF, in Fairfield in 1997. All three of those teams got in with an 11-18 record. That's crazy. And people are like, that sucks. That's horrible. It's terrible. That is fantastic. It is great.
Because you have to step up and win. Despite your record, you have an opportunity to pull off a miracle and get in the dance.
And just like soccer. You want to talk about the opportunity to score? It could be 0-0 for 90 plus minutes, but it was great because they had the opportunity. Well, you're giving this team an opportunity, 11-18, to not only win a championship, and we know that's not going to happen, but they can change the landscape of the entire tournament by knocking off a team. Ask Virginia how that works. We finally had a 16 lose to a 16 beat a 1 seed. That's now happened twice. So, you used to always have to just put the ones, right? The 1-1-1-1-1-1, the 4-1s. You can't do that anymore. We've had a 16 beat a 1. It's already happened. It's not unprecedented. But I'm sitting there thinking to myself, how cool is that to be 11-18 and to be able to play, because we all love Cinderella. She's the hottest thing at the dance. She's got the best looking shoes and the best looking body, and we want to see her do really well. And so it's only a matter of time. And by the way, out of those 19 teams that were 500 or worse, only one team was not a 16 seed. And every one of those teams has lost their basketball game, which is fine, by an average of 25 points or more, which is fine. But it's still, that's what makes it so special, because, we're not talking about 11-on-11 here. We're talking 5-on-5. We're talking about great guard play. We're talking about a guy who gets hot and starts the game going 9 for 10 and 5 for 5 and 3-point land. I'm telling you, it's 40, 48 minutes of ball, whatever you're going to be playing on OT. And if you get 2 or 3 guys hot and you got great guard play, and your press is just working really, really well that night, you can scare the hell out of a lot of Kansas, a lot of Kentuckys, and a lot of UConns by being a Fairfield or being by one of these teams at 11-18. That to me is just, I just think, I look through my bracket and I look for those teams. Wow, that team was 11-18 and got into March Madness. How cool is that? I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's really unlike anything else, because just to have the opportunity despite a losing season, but it's all about the progression of your team, and when the lights get brightest and the stage is the most meaningful, if a team steps up and knocks off the more heralded teams with the gaudy records, there's really not too many other sports that you can name. I have to say, you made reference to something that I think is one of the funnier things that you've told me, that because we did a show all about soccer early on Kiefer and Curry, and I've been not a big fan of that game, but you just made reference to something I think's hilarious that I want to remind our listeners. Tony and Al Del Greco, who is just a terrific guy, and Al's a big soccer guy. And Tony said he had a argument on air on their morning drive show. And Tony said, well, they never score in soccer. And Al's retort that you just related was, well, Tony, it's not about scoring. It's about the opportunity to score.
You gotta be kidding me, man.
That's what's exciting about soccer.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Al. I got to see the biscuit in the basket to get excited.
Doubt. Yeah, I finished the deal. Make it happen. Yeah, it's just, I mean, I absolutely love it. And, I love the postseason so much. And I know a lot of people, I hate the word purist. I probably consider myself a purist. And when you say you're a purist, it just tells me you're old. And you're not willing to adapt and look at things differently. I'm a purist.
Yes.
The whole baseball, the shot clock and blah, blah, that's terrible. And I can't
people still hate the wild card in pro sports.
I know. And I'm like, dude, you're allowing more teams to enjoy the season longer, and you're allowing more teams to live that dream. Well, they're never going to win. Well, it doesn't matter if they're not going to win or not. If they win, if they win just one series, go ask Virginia, 1 seed playing a 16. I know that 16 is not going to win a national champion, but it could sure screw up the year for someone else. I think they thought they would. And when you're talking about 6 games and the progression of that, the further that team goes, the more it screws things up. And listen, why do we love March Madness so much? We love the bracket because Lucy, who's back in HR, who doesn't have a flipping clue what's going on in college basketball, could win the pool. She could win the flipping pool, right? Just because she's putting down her favorite mascot or the favorite color of her team. Oh, I like that purple team. I'm going to beat the blue team. She has no clue who she's. But that's what makes it so great, and that's what's so inclusive about it. That's why we love the NFL and the Super Bowl, because you don't have to like the NFL to love the Super Bowl. Why do you think they got Beyonce out there singing at halftime? They realize that not every Beyonce fan's an NFL fan. Why do you think they're showing pictures of Taylor Swift every 3 or 4 minutes? They're trying to bring in the peripheral fan. So, I mean, it brings in that fan base that normally isn't there. And that's just, I mean, that's more people to the party. That's great. Come on in, enjoy the time and see what we're celebrating here. But it's fantastic. I thought it was really interesting too. We talked about college hoops, and a lot of people's like, I'm all about making things better in life. If you're number one and you're killing it, and you're on the Kiefer and Curry show, we're on top of the mountain right now. We're killing it. Everyone wants to listen to us. Everyone knows we have a great show. People are going to try to start knocking us off. As part of our ABC 3340 show on Saturday mornings, we're always trying to be not only inclusive, but adaptive to bring in special guests like Paul Feinbaum and to bring your son and talk about gambling and and we're always trying to make things better. And so college basketball, now they're talking about perhaps doubling the field from 68 to 136 teams.
Wow. And
the reason they're doing that is we have roughly 342 basketball teams. And right now, out of all the major sports, and I'm going D1 baseball, I'm going D1 football, I'm going Major League Baseball, NFL, NHL, and the NBA, out of all those major sports, they have the smallest percentage of teams that actually make the postseason, because only 68 out of 342 teams actually make the big dance, which is roughly 33%. If you double that, you're obviously not going to 66%, but you're also still talking less than half the field making it in. You're a big hockey fan. Hell, half the field gets in. 53% of your fan base is happy at the end of a soccer season everywhere in the NHL and the NBA as well. Everyone's like, well, everyone makes it in. 16 teams make it. Okay, that's fine. Well, the NBA season is too long. Okay, you either like it or you don't. People who sit there and say the season's too long aren't fans. If you say the Major League Baseball season's too long, you're not a fan. Get out of here. I don't want to go to 154 games. I want 182 games. I want it to be longer. I want to add more games. You want it to last as long as possible. If you sit there and ever say, well, the season's too long, then you're not a fan of that sport. So NHL, I love it. I love the fact that there's 53% of the teams, 16 teams get in. I love the NBA where more than half the league gets in. I love that some teams under 500 get in. I think it's great. The more, the merrier.
Yeah, it's that opens the door to the discussion. You just touched on baseball. I find the baseball season, it really compelling, and people that say it's too long, they play, so many games but rightfully so, because baseball is a different kind of sport. Basketball is absolutely a tournament sport. The regular season is fine, but I don't find myself watching a whole lot of regular season college basketball, Tony, because to me, basketball is the ultimate tournament sport. And it kind of goes stride for stride with the American dream, that when you get on the biggest stage with the brightest lights, if you can step up and perform and work harder and be better prepared and have things go your way, which is a lot of the summary of how successful people are in the right place at the right time, but do the right things to succeed. College basketball more mirrors regular life, where baseball does in a different way of you're in for the long haul, and you've got to be prepared because you're going to have catastrophic injuries and setbacks and slumps and streaks and different things. So baseball is a marathon, not a sprint. Basketball is just a perfect tournament sport because there's not many sports that, in the professional ranks, most of them are based on series where you have to win 3 or 4 or 5 games to eliminate an opponent. Basketball, it's sudden death, and that's another element in the NCAA tournament that makes it different, that no matter how good you are, if you have one slip up, like Virginia a couple years ago, the number 1 overall seed in the whole tournament, they became the first team ever, a number 1 seed, to lose to a 16 when Maryland Baltimore knocked them out, the 16 seed who got in by winning the Podunk Conference or whatever the hell league they were in. And they played a perfect game. Virginia was off that night, and they were eliminated. And that kind of drama, those Cinderella stories, is what absolutely defines this event. And I think that's why America is obsessed with it.
No, I totally agree with you. And, it's funny because when we're talking about the postseason, man, I mean, you go into every season, it's always the great. I mean, an opening day is coming up in Major League Baseball season. It's one of the greatest days of the year for me. It's Christmas.
For sure.
I got an opportunity to go to Cincinnati for the opening day game last year. And it is a holiday in Cincinnati, literally a holiday. The banks are closed. Everything is closed on that day. And because Cincinnati in 1869 was the first Major League Baseball team ever.
The Red Stockings.
The Red Stockings. And for years and years and years, the Cincinnati Reds were always the ones that threw out the first pitch every year. They had to be there because they were the first Major League Baseball team ever to play. And of course, they don't do that anymore. But I mean, they closed the streets down. You go to Flanagan's and people are drinking
big parade.
6 o'clock in the morning. And then, of course, you watch the baseball game and it's just fantastic. And it's just such a huge celebratory type of thing. But you go into the season and you're 0-0 and everyone's 0-0 and you're all even. And you know that in 4 or 5 months, it's all going to look different. And it's just, I mean, there's so many things that happen with free agency and with injuries and with money and with win streaks. And there's just so many great things that happen in all the sports that just make the postseason so much fun to watch. And again, when you're talking about the college basketball season, it's one thing I really like college baskall the way it is right now. And I am one of those kind of guys. I mean, old stogie, like don't change it, don't switch it. Why mess something that's good? I'm really concerned because I think it's only a matter of time before this NIL collective and this transfer portal thing really starts to affect basketball. Now, we've had it more in basketball than we've had in college football in a long period of time. But I know we're unionizing. Dartmouth now has a union in their basketball. I get that. I just. Please be careful with our sport. Don't mess our sport up.
Yes.
Don't mess with March Madness. March Madness is by far the best thing out there. It's an entity on its own, and it's an NCAA sport. It's the only thing that's kind of working against the NCAA, believe it or not. The NCAA makes a ton of money off March Madness, a lot more than they ever make in college football, because the NCAA is not part of the CFP. They have nothing to do with the college football playoffs. That's not them. So this is the moneymaker. And I'll tell you something. If you're going to sit there and pout and give the NCAA hell for everything they do, okay. But you have to admit they put on quite the party with March Madness every year.
That's for sure. And yeah, for folks that don't know, Tony's right on target there, that in the 1980s, Georgia and Oklahoma, the institutions, the schools sued to wrest control of college football scheduling away. The NCAA was the absolute ruler back in the old days. They filed suit that I think it went all the way to the Supreme Court that ruled that the universities could negotiate their own deals and keep the NCAA out of it. But somehow the NCAA has managed to keep a grip on basketball.
Yeah.
And it's really the engine that finances everything they do operationally.
Everything.
Because they have a long-term contract with CBS, and that contract is with the NCAA, not with the institutions, unlike football. So you're talking about two completely different entities here.
It's really interesting. And of course, again, the NCAA is a non-for-profit. Much like the PGA is. And you're right. They've got a stranglehold on that. And I just be careful. I just don't screw up my basketball tournament, man. I mean, it's so stinking good and it's so much fun. It's the one time of the year where everyone's like, who you got in your bracket? You're going to hear the word.
Oh yeah. And everybody fills one out. That's everybody. I just put on Facebook last night when my grandson was less than a year old. He was 7 months old. His dad, I mentioned on TV last week, had different color blocks and had him pick an entire bracket sitting in his high chair.
There you go.
And it's hilarious. He goes, okay, Alabama against North Texas. And he would pick the red block case, goes, oh, Alabama. And he'd pencil him in his bracket. We did a family competition, Tony, about 11 people, cousins and nephews and brothers and sisters and all the folks in the family, even all the girls filled out their brackets. King at 7 months old, his bracket actually beat 4 of the 11 family members. So that just tells you exactly what a great undertaking this sport is. And the whole ritual of filling out your bracket is just something that every American is sort of, it's almost like it's right about the time for around tax season. But not only do you have to fill out your IRS form, you must fill out your bracket.
Yeah, and you cannot have it there later than that Thursday morning, brother. You're going to get your taxes after April 15th.
That's right. The pressure's on now.
You can get an extension. You can get an extension, but you cannot get an extension with March Madness.
No.
You were talking about my son. I think he was maybe 9 or 10 years old, and he's always been well steeped in sports because, I mean, obviously his dad's in sports radio.
Yeah.
At ESPN and everything else. And he was actually part of our Jocks bracket challenge. And I think we had 38,000 brackets or something. And it came down to
who kept up with that?
It came down to 2 ball. Thank goodness it was when it was being computerized, but it came down to Jim Dunaway and my son, Santo Curry,
How about
down to the last game of the season. And if one team won, my son wins the bracket. And if the other team won, Jim Dunaway, and my son ended up winning the bracket that year. So we touted it. My son was smarter than Jim Dunaway, which he probably is probably a way. But then I told my son, I said, son, anyone can win it once. You must win it twice. Everyone can win. Well, you can win something once. You can win a championship once because sometimes things just line up and sometimes it's just a fluke and sometimes you can just win a championship. Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl, for God's sakes. We know that. I said, but to win 2 tells everyone that you can separate yourself. And of course, he wins the bracket challenge the following year. And I said, you're glorified, dude. You're good. From this point on, you go 0-64 and everyone's going to love you for your bracket challenge. So
yeah.
My daughter's got Marquette winning it all over Drake. Coming up,
man.
Yeah, I think she picked Drake because she thought it was the singer, which is fine. And I'm not sure why she picked the Warriors and Marquette, but I'm like, you know what? That could happen. Marquette could win a national championship this year.
No kidding.
So yeah, it's just fantastic. And the one sport we have not talked about, and I have to. What's your thoughts on? And you may not even know. What's your thoughts on postseason in NASCAR?
I'm aware of it. I know they compile points to get into contention for the last group of races. It makes sense. I applaud NASCAR, who for many years, of course, just ran their regular Cup Series, and I'm not sure if that was all based on points, but I give them credit for recognizing the drama of a postseason. Mm-hmm. Golf has done the same thing with the big tournament over at East Lake Country Club in Atlanta every year, the Tour Championship, because you have all these majors, but it still creates a postseason element. And I think every sport wants to get in on that. And Tony, I would argue that March Madness is probably the leading impetus for all these other sports to develop some kind of postseason because of the phenomenal obsession and success that's had. So I think any sport that has a competition element to determine championships is really on the right track. So I think those sports have made the right moves to make that happen.
I totally agree with you. I think anytime you can expand your sport, you can expand it during the calendar season. You can expand it with your fan base. You can expand it with financial event. Whatever you're going to do, whenever you can expand, you must expand.
Absolutely.
As long as it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg and you lose money doing it. The other thing is, again, you're talking about, the NBA, for example, they had this in-season tournament this year. I didn't really understand it. I didn't really get it. I know the Lakers won it.
Who were basically a 500 team, emphasizing our point. They were not the best team in the league, and yet in their elimination tournament, the Lakers reigned supreme.
Unbelievable. And I think they went 2-13 or something their next 15 games or something like that. But they're winning so they got an extra $1 million a piece, something, so it's well worth it. And they got a trip to Vegas out of the deal. So I know it's probably working out. Now, it would be really interesting if you did something where, I know in Major League Baseball, the All-Star game, that actually procures, whether you're going to have home field advantage or not in the postseason, which I kind of like. I like when you put some extra equity into something that we look at as it's just pure glorified entertainment. Imagine what you do in the NBA if you said, listen, you get home court advantage based on whether your team wins the All-Star game or not. I mean, all of a sudden you start playing some defense, right?
Maybe. But it's absent now.
But I did want to mention NASCAR because we got the Talladega Super Speedway coming up here in the next few weeks. And I'll be honest with you, I really followed it close for a long period of time. I'm not quite sure, frankly, how it works at this point, because I know it's changed so much. But you have different parts of the race. You have different parts of the season. You win part of the season you're in. You want people to keep up with your sport. And if you're going to make it a little more difficult to do so, then you're going to do some studying. Maybe it makes it better for the sport after all. So who knows?
Yeah, I agree completely, and I think you'll see more and more of that. And again, I give most of the credit to the NCAA men's basketball tournament for kind of paving the road for all these other sports to go, wait a minute, we want in on that kind of excitement and that kind of drama to determine our champions and have major events. And there's nothing better than a major event. I got to ride along last year for a lot of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and ultimately the Las Vegas Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup in just their 6th season of existence. And the drama of going to those games, Tony, I love going to any sports event or watching any sports event, but the drama of going to a playoff game in baseball or going to a World Series game or an NBA Finals or an NHL Stanley Cup, those games' importance and intensity is so magnified that it's the best thing going.
Hey, coming up this Saturday, it's going to be March 23rd. So no matter where you're watching the show or listening to the show on the TKR app, with thanks to 100,000 folks who download the app. And of course, we run the show at least 5 days a week. We try to do things that are obviously very, very topical and time sensitive, but we also talk about things that aren't. So you can listen to the show whenever you want. Go back and listen to all of our favorite podcasts. We're available on every major industry out there, and including right here on the Tony Curry YouTube channel. But you can also see the starting lineup, which is a fantastic show that Kip and I do every single Saturday morning, 10:30 to 11 o'clock on ABC 3340. Our good friend Paul Feinbaum, who was supposed to be on last week, he's going to join us here on the March 23rd show. In perfect timing, it's the end of the football season as we know it. Now we're into March Madness. He was, of course, at the SEC basketball tournament this past week, and so he'll have a lot to talk about. That's going to be hard. We get these great guests. We've had Leonard Skinner on. We're going to have ZZ Top on. We get a lot of rock and rollers, authors, all kinds of special guests. Jeff Spiegel, James Spann was on. He was awesome, fantastic. Someone told me, Dark Side of the Pooch, Dr. Rab Stewart, who is the owner of Rossbridge Animal Hospital, who does a show called Dark Side of the Pooch with me here on Tony Curry Radio, ran into James Spann at church last Sunday. and said, by the way, I saw you on the starting lineup with Kip Keefer and Tony Curry yesterday. It was fantastic. And James said, I have no clue why they want me on their show. He goes, why in the world would anyone want some old crusty meteorologist on their morning show? And I was like, that cat is either filled with true humility or he's just so full of crap. I said, but man, he brings so many followers. People love James Spann. So we want to thank him and we love his humility.
Well, remember, Tony, I asked him on the show, I said, when you changed your major from electrical engineering to meteorology back in the 70s, James, could you ever have imagined that you would reach rock star status by talking about the weather? He goes, I never thought of it then, and I can't believe it now.
It's really amazing.
He's just in shock that he's become what he's become, but I can tell he takes a lot of pride in. And Tony, what really stuck with me was he talked about all the innovations and different things. And he said to us, and this is why I love doing interviews and interacting with different people from different fields. It doesn't have to be sports or politics. James Spann said, but then you have days like 2011 where we had the killer tornadoes. I was on the air for 14 consecutive hours and we still lost 252 souls on my watch. So that's how seriously he takes it. He feels like he's responsible for the safety of people when danger is affront. And that says so much about who this guy is and why he's the popular icon that he's become.
And another guy, and certainly we'll have to have an ego to be in the sport, but Paul Feinbaum's another one of those guys is filled with humility. I hadn't talked to Paul probably in the last couple of years. I reached out to him several months ago. We obviously worked against each other for 20 years and we worked with each other for 20 years. And for him to be so open, and he's a busy guy. And I realize as I get older in life, there's only one thing that I can give you or take away from you that means the most to me, and that's my time. And if I'm willing to spend my time with you, then you should take it and you should appreciate it. And I fully, it's a reciprocal situation. And for him to take time out of his busy schedule, an hour before he goes on the air at ESPN and actually come do our show on Saturday the 23rd, which is pretty cool. And I know he's an accessible guy, and he's hilarious, but I don't take that lightly, and I really appreciate him doing that with his time. So I try to remember. I'm sure you've done these things where people will ask, "Hey, Uncle Kip, can you come talk to my school class? For career day?" Yeah. And you're like, what an honor. What an honor. I've done career days at Hoover High School. What an honor. Don't ever get time for that kind of stuff. That when you're asked to be an MC or an honor, it's just to be included in something, that to be thought in that light, to be considered an expert in your field of business, first of all, is a huge compliment. But yeah, for James and for Paul to do that, we greatly appreciate it. We'll look forward to getting all kinds of special guests on there. Info at TonyCurryRadio.net if you want to drop us an email or check our show out. Starting lineup, it's fantastic. 10:30, 11 o'clock, ABC 3340 every single Saturday. Till next week, my friend. Thank you.
This has been great. Let's see some upsets this week.
Yes.
And let Cinderella stay at the dance. That's what makes it great.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.